Scott Moe with us. He's going to start with some opening remarks, and then we'll move on to questions.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. The last couple of days, I had found my way to Washington to engage with a number of members of the government in Washington, D.C. And I would just say that there's been a few exciting things that have happened here over the course of the last week, and I just wanted to add my congratulations to our Saskatchewan the best fans in the league, but this year we have the best team in the league as well. It was a great game on Sunday, and everyone had a good time. We're not quite done with football in our province yet this year. There's never been a year where we've had the Grey Cup championship team, the Canadian Bowl championship team, and the Vanier Cup champion. All of these we have not had from the same province in the same year. This year, as we know, the Rough Riders are the Grey Cup champions. The Hilltops previously were the Canadian Bowl champions. And this Saturday, our U of S Huskies can complete the Triple Crown of a Canadian football by winning the Vanier Cup right here in Regina. So as I said, over the last couple of days, I digressed from my football comments to our trip to Washington, our mission to Washington. I've been in Washington, D.C., meeting with a number of U.S. Elected officials at various levels, as well as some secretaries, trade representatives within the President's administration. We met with U.S. Trade Ambassador Jameson Greer. We met with the Secretary of Treasury, Scott Bessent, and the Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick. And it's important, I think, for us as a province to support our federal government in carrying on those lines of communication with our largest trading partners around the world, and our largest trading partner is the United States of America. We've also been working alongside premiers in Canada's elected federal government to try to support them in reaching a deal with the United States of America. Tariff-free trade, wherever that might be around the world, helps everyone. In particular, it's beneficial to those working in the province of Saskatchewan. We know we have highly integrated economies. Saskatchewan is very globally connected, and that integrated economy is of particular importance when it comes to trade with the United States of America, with over about $30 billion in exports that finds its way south each and every year. We are an export-based economy in this province. That is how we create jobs in our province. We know the United States of America also understands the importance of those exports, and that we have, in this province, in this nation, but in particular in Saskatchewan, we have everything that people need for us to become not just a Canadian energy superpower, but for us to come together and become a North American energy superpower, which would cause us in our nation to make great strides in the Prime Minister's aspirations to be the strongest economy in the G7 nations. Saskatchewan relies on our trading partners, and more importantly, we rely on the trade relationships that we have with those partners. And that's why we have a very focused relationship with them, from province to nation and province to our customers in those markets. When issues arise, we have those relationships with them in the said country, and then we rely on those contacts to work our way through some difficult situations. A year ago, we had no Canadian conversations going on in India. We found our way as a province to India to precipitate and to bring Canadian government and the Indian government together to start those negotiations, and we see that happening today. Just a week ago, I was out in Niagara at the G7 meeting to meet with the Foreign Affairs Minister from India as well, to further that relationship and further that opportunity that we have to find our way to a tariff-free trade agreement with India. The same can be said with Mexico. A year ago, there were no conversations that were happening with Mexico. We found our way to Mexico through the strength of our trade office there to bring our national government and the Mexican national government to that negotiating table, and we see those discussions happening now. More recently, we had seen relations and trade negotiations being non-existent with the country of China. As you know, the province, through our trade office in China, found our way to China, and now have our national government and the Chinese government starting to talk about, how we can move forward with a more broad trade relationship than we even have. Recently, we saw our trade relations and the conversation and the negotiations, more importantly, with the United States of America fall apart and break off. And so we thought it would be prudent for us to rely on the relationships that we have with many of our U.S. counterparts, whether they be elected in the Senate or the Congress, or whether they be part of the Trump administration more properly and part of his cabinet, to use the contacts that we have to go down and do what we can in supporting our federal government and the government of the United States of America to come back to that negotiating table. It's important for us to keep the conversations and the lines of communication open with all countries that we trade to, and in particular, it's important for us to keep the lines and do what we can as a province to keep those lines and communication open with the United States of America. Why is that important? Well, Saskatchewan has the highest per capita export value of any state or province in North America. We very much are reliant on our trade relations and very much create our wealth from exporting product to over 160 countries around the world, the largest of those being the United States of America, China, and India. Our goal is always to get countries back to the negotiating table. In particular, get back to the negotiating table with our country, Canada. As I said, in the case of China, it's the same holds true with the United States of America. It isn't going to be any premier or any province that is going to stand up and sign an entire free trade deal with a nation like the United States, China, or India. But it's important for us as a province to support our federal government in their negotiations, and yes, at times support them in finding a path back to that negotiating table, as we've seen the breakdown in negotiations with the United States of America. I would say that what is good for Saskatchewan, and we very much are focused on Saskatchewan when we engage, but what is good for Saskatchewan is also good for Canada. And we are working towards just that goal. And the best way that we feel for that is to ensure that we are creating an environment where both nations can sit down and have those trade discussions to move our province and our nation forward. I'm sure you'll have some questions, so I will pause here and answer any questions that you might have.
Who went with you on this trip?
As far as
Like, what delegation went with you?
we had, I'd have to even count maybe 3 or 4 people from the province here. No.
No.
Was the federal government aware that you were going to Washington and meeting with the cabinet members from the United States government?
Yes, yeah, no, I talked with Minister LeBlanc as well as other ministers and met with Prime Minister on Saturday.
When you take these trips to Washington,
Missions, we call them.
how do you know whether you are making any progress in your goals?
I guess you don't until after you come back and let time, I guess, some time pass, and that ultimately is the judge. But I would say in the case of a year ago when we went to India, it was the highest ranking diplomat in India, the highest ranking Canadian diplomat in India over the course of the past year has been the Saskatchewan Trade Commissioner. So I would say that has been a positive impact, the Saskatchewan Trade Commissioner and our mission to India in bringing the conversations between our nation of Canada and India back on track. The same, I think, could be said with our mission to China, where we were happy to be joined by the Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister, Cody Blois, and we see those discussions starting to happen on it, not only resuming but expanding trade with China as well. And about a year ago, we had a similar situation where trades had fallen off or broken down with Mexico. We were in that market, and we see that pretty open and free with respect to the discussion between Canada and Mexico, and everyone up until recently being back to the table for the expansion of maybe a USMCA agreement. Recently, we saw those trade negotiations with the United States of America fall off, and we're hopeful that our time and our time spent in Washington, in particular meeting with 3 of the United States of America's cabinet, the President's cabinet, we would hope that we were able to instill in that conversation the importance of not only a trade relationship with Saskatchewan, but more broadly across Canada as well, in how we can work together to achieve not only what we all too often take for granted in food security, but also energy security. And through working together in our military investment through our federal government, ensure that we are secure as a continent as opposed to just two separate nations.
Do you see any positive signs, positive indications on this mission?
I think there's a realization that there is and needs to be a path forward. But there's also a realization that in the short term, there's some challenging discussions on certain sectors that are going to happen. And we would say that the best way to find our way through those challenging discussions is for everyone to be at the table, which we currently are not. And so that would be our urging through our dialogue the last number of days is let's find our way back to the table. Let's find our way, forward so that we can, replicate some of what we do see happening in what is a very challenging immediate environment. But in that environment, we're seeing, companies like Cameco and Westinghouse sign, multi-billion-dollar deals to move forward with nuclear energy here in North America. We're seeing, engagement in the ag industry that I think it bodes very positive for our Saskatchewan ag industry moving forward as well. And let's ensure that we're having discussions about what the true impact of any movement in certain sectors might be on Americans. For example, the cost on American agriculture, should there be, expansions of various tariffs into certain areas. And so some of it is preventing and helping everyone help themselves by not moving into a space that might be problematic. We've seen as recently as this last week, President Trump has indicated that they are making efforts to lower the cost or curb the cost of food or groceries. What goes into groceries, fertilizer, fuel, and ultimately agri-food products. Some of that coming from Canada. And so, part of it is to, highlight the opportunities that we are achieving, such as the nuclear deal, the Westinghouse deal, of which has a very direct Saskatchewan connection. Part of it is about, getting in front of any decisions that might have some challenging outcomes for everyone, not just Canadians, but Americans as well. In the time moving forward. And then part of it is we just need to get everyone back to the table so that we can resume negotiations.
Did you meet with Trump's cabinet separately, or were they all together in the same room with you?
3 separate meetings.
Is there an openness at all from any of them to get a deal with Canada?
I think there's an openness to the importance of getting a deal in North America. I think there's some differences around maybe even not so much what that deal looks like, but how the progression towards whether it's one deal or multiple deals, what that negotiation actually looks like. But I think there is an openness to an understanding that we need to get to, some level of equilibrium or some level of certainty in the trade environment that we have. Very much Saskatchewan and Canada are part of the North American ecosystem, economic system, and trading system, and so there is an understanding that we do need to get there, and our urging is that we get back to the table and find our way there sooner rather than later, as it was in China, as it was in India, as it was in Mexico.
Was this a planned trip by you, or was this something kind of last minute to go there?
No, planned by myself, and I would say. We were putting it together tentatively, and once we saw trade negotiations fall off, it firmed up very quickly.
I just want to ask you about the Globe and Mail's reporting the federal government is in talks with Alberta on the prospect of building a new pipeline, also considering allowing some tanker traffic on the northern BC coast. I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, we're in those discussions as well, and very supportive of not only the removal of the emissions cap, but the opportunity to bring tankers in to that northwestern coast in British Columbia, not just for oil, but for other products as well. We'd like to expand, for example, our potash exports over the next number of years. We want to grow more agricultural products as well as expand our market access for oil. So we've been part of those discussions and very supportive of Alberta's position. When it comes to that piece of infrastructure, very supportive of them being a proponent at these early stages, and highly confident that as we balance the regulatory environment, that you'll see the private sector move very quickly. That's not in any way to be said that, it's going to be a free fall for tankers on the West Coast. It's fully within reason to think that there will be, work that will be done on specific laneways and things so that there is a minimal impact to, the surrounding environment. We all live here as Canadians, and we certainly don't want to, openly in any way put our environment at unnecessary risk. And so I think there certainly is a path forward. Again, the table and the opportunity, whether it be trade negotiations or how do we move forward from a regulatory perspective to expand our economy, there's a place for a reasoned negotiation and a reasoned discussion. And I've been happy to be at least part of that discussion over the last while and continue to be part of it with the federal government in Alberta in this case.
What do you think we can see an agreement between the federal government, Alberta, Saskatchewan?
When it's right. When it's right and we have an agreement in place that I think we'll be able to move forward with the firm belief that it will be beneficial, not only to those areas that might be, in this case, producing, energy, but beneficial to all of those along the pipeline route, beneficial to those at the port facilities in that space, but also indirectly beneficial more broadly to the Canadian economy. And I've said all along that we will have some oil in that particular piece of infrastructure that would go to the northwest coast that comes from our province, not near the amount that Alberta will. However, to decrease the basis, it would make each and every barrel of oil produced in Canada more valuable. It would increase the opportunity we have to send more of Saskatchewan oil south, so we could increase our production to some degree in this province as well, and would increase the opportunity we have to expand some of our port facilities outside the Port of Vancouver. There's a real challenge for us in this province, sending 70% of that export value I talked about earlier out through Western Canada's largest city, right through the downtown. And so any opportunities I think we have moving forward to expand port access, port capacity outside of that downtown Vancouver is a positive for us as Canadians.
White House last week lifted tariffs on a number of grocery and food items, coffee, beef, I believe were among them. Just wondering what the impact is on Saskatchewan, whether that might mean more of a willingness by the U.S. to move on tariffs just in general.
Yeah, well, I think Saskatchewan is in, not the unique, but in a position where, largely we're not directly impacted and are protected to some degree by the USMCA agreement on most of the items that we send to the U.S. The large ticket industrial items like oil, agriculture, much of our agricultural products, if there is any tariff or non-tariff barriers, they're actually related to a separate conversation than the direct tariffs that the president or the Trump administration is putting in place. I think what you see there is a recognition by the president that grocery prices and food costs are increasing. And I would say that same recognition is here in Canada as well, that our grocery costs and our food prices, our general cost of living, has been increasing across Canada, and that's true in the United States as well. And this is a recognition of the president of that. Timely, I think, associated with our visit, as we export a significant amount of food products to the United States of America, and so I wouldn't expect that there would be significant tariffs applied in that space, given these comments and this recognition. And we also supply significant amounts of energy products that are made into gasoline and diesel fuel that are very much part of the production system and the cost of groceries in the U.S. So I would think that we would have some insulation in that space as well when it comes to potential tariffs down the way. And last but certainly not least is potash. We produce 35% of global potash supply. Virtually all of American potash comes from the province of Saskatchewan. And it very much is part of their food production system, and part of that cost of any increases due to a tariff in the potash sector would be passed on through grocery prices to the American consumer and family. And so we did talk specifically about the need for non-tariff access to Saskatchewan, Alberta, Canadian oil, as well as the importance of having non-tariff access to fertilizer products like potash. So that's the recognition that I read into those statements, is that grocery prices are, and cost of living, but specifically grocery prices in the U.S. are increasing. And Saskatchewan has a role to play in that. And so I view it as a positive from our province's perspective, because it would lend credence to the reason to not put tariffs on the product, some of the products that we're sending to the United States of America.
Premier, when you travel to Washington, how do you make sure you're on the same page, advocating for the same things as the federal government?
Talk to them before we go.
And like make sure that you have the same messaging
Yeah, we're there to advance the conversation with our largest trading partner. So as I say, I talked with Minister LeBlanc. I met with the Prime Minister Saturday evening before we absolutely cleaned up in the football game on Sunday. Talked about any sensitivities that might be there from the Canadian perspective. But listen, we're there to, advocate specifically on behalf of Saskatchewan, but ensure that we are supportive and doing things that are supportive of getting, in this case, restarting negotiations between Canada and the United States of America. And what is good for Saskatchewan is good for Canada. We truly believe that. And so we talked to the federal government before we were in market. This is, to some degree, new. With this Prime Minister. We didn't have that opportunity under the previous leader, and so we welcome that. And we welcome Prime Minister Carney's efforts to raise Canada's credibility in the international sphere. He's in the United Arab Emirates today. As you know, we have an office in the Emirates and have done, a lot of work, not only with the Emirates more proper, but with a number of sector involvement entities that they have, such as DP Ports, which is one of the largest port companies in the world, has presence in virtually every Canadian port. And I would say has been a valuable contact for us from time to time. So we commend Prime Minister Carney for elevating the credibility of our nation, of Canada internationally, and we support it. And we'll go into these markets and try to support our federal government getting back to the table for negotiations.
You mentioned some sensitivities, making sure that those weren't brought up. Are you able to share any of those sensitivities with us?
It's not to make sure they aren't brought up. I think right now you can see, very publicly, Canada, having a second look at some of their military procurement when it comes to fighter jets, for example. That, that's a current sensitivity between the nation and the two nations, Canada and the U.S., with the previous indication that we were looking at F-35s, now looking at, potentially something else. That, that's a sensitivity between the two nations. We don't have a Saskatchewan military, and so it isn't necessarily a direct sensitivity between the province and the United States of America, but I want to be aware of that and aware of Canada's position going into, whatever conversations I might be in as well. But I would say to be aware of those so that I am representing as a Canadian at those tables, but I'm also representing on behalf of Saskatchewan at those tables. And our main focus is trade. Our main focus is, pushing our province to be a significant part of some of the Prime Minister's aspirations to have the strongest economy in the G7 and to become a global energy superpower. Our relationship, specifically our trade relationship and investment relationship back and forth with the U.S. is going to be a big part of that. Many of the companies that we see employing people in this province are American-owned, and the 49th parallel certainly hasn't been a barrier for investment or for exports in years gone by to any significant degree, and we want that to continue.
When it comes to the First Minister's meeting that was just a few days ago, and
We had that too.
And the major projects that were announced shortly after that, I just want to get your thoughts on what was said in that meeting and on the projects.
Yeah, well, the major projects list, as I've said, is really a stopgap to ensure that we have some projects moving forward in what has become essentially an unworkable regulatory environment in our nation. And I would hope that we're still committed to doing the hard work of fixing the broad regulatory environment so that we can get out of a situation where we have federal politicians picking which projects are moving forward. They should be the projects that should move forward are the ones that are responsibly investing and responsibly engaging with the communities that they may have positive or hopefully all positive impact with. And so we need to fix that regulatory environment. On the list itself, you're going to see that list, ever expand throughout time. And so I unlike many in the national media, are less worried about the latest 4 or 5 additions or 6 additions to that list. concern myself more with what we see coming down the pipe and how we're actually getting these projects across the line. For instance, you've seen, and we commend and support Premier Smith with Alberta being the proponent in the early stages of this pipeline to the Northwest Coast, a corridor to the Northwest Coast that would then have the opportunity to link up with a corridor to Churchill, which would have the opportunity to link up with Premier Ford's corridor to James Bay, which would then have the opportunity to link up with Wind West, I think, is Premier Houston's project. All of them somewhat aspirational, but the corridor, I think, would be a huge generational step forward for the economic prospects of Canada in the decades ahead. But that's an example of a project that may or may not be on that list at some point in time. Whether it is or isn't, it's more important that we work together to get it done, and to get it done to benefit all Canadians, whether they be along the line or involved in that industry in any way, shape, or form. As you know, we had the foreign mine, or the McIlvaine Bay project was included on that list. We have a couple more uranium projects, significant projects, that we would hope would be on that list if they need to be at some point in time. They have all the provincial approvals waiting for the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission to do some of their work. But many other projects in the province as well. And we've said, I don't know that we would ever release a list, because every project that ever has any type of a federal touch, regulatory touch, whether that is a uranium mine, whether it's a copper mine, whether it's a potash mine, whether it's an oil and gas project, whether it's a RM putting a culvert through a road and has to have some approvals from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. All of those projects are of the highest priority to the applicants that are doing them, and all of them have the potential to be slowed in some way, shape, or form by the regulatory touch that the federal government has. And so our project list is long, and it will also be a project list that is in motion and will be continually added to, and we're hopeful that there'll be projects that'll be taken off as they go onto the Bill C-5 list as well.
Thanks, everyone.
That's it.
Were you sad to miss the
in
parade?
your office?
Were you sad to miss the parade?
It was quite something.
Yeah.
It was quite something.
It looked like I was getting photos and all.